Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We're going to start with two videos, and I'll start the video on the left first. This was from Argentina last week on the 23rd, and that's right, you're looking at locusts once again. Now, we talked a lot about those locusts in parts of Africa and parts of the Middle East, but there was a huge swarm last week that went through parts of Argentina and into southern Brazil, and it was consuming a lot of vegetation as they did so. This was a video that we found at the end of the week of a guy that went out with a shovel to kind of clean some of the locusts off of a tree. And I watched this video, and it just kind of makes my skin crawl a little bit. Well, continuing with that story, I want to show you a map. This map looks globally at where we have different land use types. And I want you to focus in on this color right here, the cropland color. And where I'd like to take you in the world next is to this part of India, south of New Delhi. And the reason why I want to go there is because we've seen the desert locusts spread out of the Horn of Africa over in the Sahel in this direction. They've also moved through Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, and then into India. And this is from the FAO, so when we're looking at this, this is their outlook for June and July. And they did a pretty darn good job predicting where these were going to go, because this was the latest video that we got here from from New Delhi, and another massive swarm of locusts. And I looked up the forecast for this area, and just kind of crazy to see that they were expecting a high temperature today of 101 degrees Fahrenheit, and the main weather hazards, widespread dust and locusts. So that would be a terrifying report to see coming from the National Weather Service, for example, here in the United States. But speaking of dust, let's talk about it, because last Friday we saw the full extent of the dust plume coming off of Africa. And we do know that annually those dust plumes are able to transport upwards of 800 plus million metric tons of dust across the Atlantic. And this particular plume made its way all the way to the eastern half of North America, really centered though down around the southeast part of the United States. Now, as the dust came through, got a couple of interesting pictures to show you here. When the dust settles after a rain, for example, you might get what you see over there on the right, which is some dust accumulating on the top of a car. And on the left, you have a bank camera here showing you how bad the air quality was in Houston. Now, when I started to see these images, I wondered if there was any sort of benefit to this dust, because we do have these dust plumes that happen each year. This was just a very large one. So I decided to go read a paper over the weekend on the mineralogy of Saharan dust. In other words, what is the dust composed of? And this is what I found. In the main section of this paper, they said that Saharan dust is mainly composed of a mixture of quartz, feldspars, and clays. Now, when we think about this, we know that there's a lot of potassium in feldspar, so I wondered if it had any sort of benefit to our crops. I don't know. I need more help with this to understand it, but I thought I would at least report to you some of the things that I was looking at here. Now, as we begin a new month here, the month of July, I want to look back quickly on precipitation patterns over the last month, because parts of North Carolina, as you can see in this map, saw between 200 and 300+% of normal precipitation. That was mainly due to a cutoff low mid-month that just sat and kind of spun over parts of North Carolina and Virginia, really cranking up the precipitation amounts. So as we look also at the U.S. drought monitor, we know that really neither of the Carolinas are sitting in drought. And if you go to the eastern half of the United States, there's just a small pocket here in the central corn or eastern corn belt and in the northeast that have drought. But it's important to see where the drought exists right now in the western United States, because that will be critical for understanding the pattern that is evolving over the next, several weeks here in the west, because that drought will tend to have a feedback cycle on the precipitation patterns. So over the weekend, this is what we saw in terms of precipitation across North Carolina. A lot of hit or miss showers and storms, some putting down some locally heavy rainfall, but more folks were dry this weekend than were wet. Meanwhile, look back around the rest of the country. We did get some pretty heavy rainfall through the center part of the United States, but where there has been drought down here, still a lot of areas missed. Now, we did pick up over the last week, which is what you're looking at now, in the midsection of the country, some pretty heavy rainfall. And this hit a lot of corn and soybean acres. And we did get rain right where we needed it, in and around Kansas City, and also down here in this section of the Cotton Belt. But what I want to do for you is I want to show you this same map, and I'd like to remove everything less than an inch. Are you ready? This is what the map looks like. So you can see across North Carolina, just a few thunderstorms over the last week capable of putting down more than an inch of rainfall, which means that the European European model did a pretty darn good job at forecasting that. But where are we going in this forecast is going to depend on how much soil moisture we have currently there. Because we know that our main moisture transports out of the Atlantic, out of the Gulf, but knowing where the soil moisture is to your west is going to be critical. So there are still sizable deficits in Texas, Oklahoma, getting into Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas, parts of Arkansas, and still deficits here despite some of the weekend rainfalls in parts of the eastern Corn Belt. In terms of soil moisture issues in the Carolinas, right here on the border is where we tend to have our greatest deficits. And if you remember, the heaviest rains kind of surrounded that throughout the month of June. Okay, our pattern is quite bunched up and blocky, and this is critical for our forecast, okay? What I mean by that is if the atmosphere had a much more free-flowing west to east movement of the jet stream, that tends to be better for our forecast for summer. In other words, more regular rainfall and no prolonged heat stress. Well, what's it doing? Well, we got this omega block that's setting up right here. So do you see how that looks like the Greek letter omega with low pressure cells on either side of it and a high pressure cell in the middle? Well, the jet stream then runs way to the north here, and there is a low that is spinning in the northeast. Now, normally if I were to see this pattern, I would be calling for much hotter and drier conditions in North Carolina if it were to persist through the month of July. But we're going to come back to that idea on drought in the west as possibly breaking this down. But this pattern is certainly going to make for very unsettled weather in parts of the Canadian prairies, in the northwest, and in the north central part of the United States. Looking at our all hazards weather map, we have a few areas we're watching for flooding today, but under that ridge, we have very strong winds and high heat building in the midsection of the country. And where that trough sits, look at that, frost. That's right, frost advisories out for Nevada, and then flood watch here as we come out of that trough. So all of this down here is high wind warning, same for Central Valley of California, and we over in North and South Carolina are kind of missing out on a lot of the main action across the country. But the question is it going to evolve in such a way that will impact us in a potentially negative way moving forward? Well, here's the three pieces I'm watching most carefully. This trough over the Pacific Northwest is going to exhibit a really cool thing called the Fujiwara effect. And that is as one trough sinks to the south, another one pulls to the north, they're going to orbit one another. And as they do, they're going to stay in place. That's going to do the second thing, which is to push a big ridge over the Great Lakes. But this trough that you see here, we're actually going to see slide back down over toward the south and east. And what it might end up doing is setting up northwest flow, which gives us in North Carolina a lot of what we call mesoscale convective systems through the remainder of the month of July. Now I want you to see all of that, and I want to watch one other thing. And that last thing is sitting right here over Scandinavia. I'm going to leave that one circled. So as I press play on this, you can see that as we move forward, the trough becomes established in the northwest. Ridge over the Great Lakes, but you see the troughing here that happened. I'll just pause this and show it to you again. That troughing right in through there. See it? This is out next Sunday. So the jet stream is going to try to go over this ridge and has to get back into this trough. And that's going to lead to a very interesting precipitation pattern for us. Now, notice the big trough that's tucked away here over Scandinavia. As we move forward, it tends to stay there all the way up to day 10. And can you just see it with me? There's kind of an aligned trough feature here with ridging on either side. And that is going to set us up with a very interesting pattern moving forward. Because normally if I saw trough here and ridge over the Great Lakes, I would be calling for a very, very hot and dry North Carolina. But that's not necessarily the setup for the month of July. In the near term, what are we anticipating? There's going to be a boundary. I'll show it to you in a few moments. It stalls out here. And on that boundary, we're going to get some flow coming from this direction that's going to give us some showers and storms to start the week. Generally, half inch of rainfall to an inch of rainfall across the state over this next week. But some of the storms will put down some locally heavier amounts, and because they're thunderstorms, some places are going to get missed. When you compare that to normal, we're just a shade drier than average. That's about a quarter of an inch to a half inch drier than what we normally see in July this time of year, okay? In terms of severe weather, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, across the top from the Storm Prediction Center, we do have thunderstorm risks the first 3 days of this week. Right now, we've got it at a marginal risk, but some of the storms could produce some locally heavy rainfall and some stronger winds. As we get toward the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you're now looking at something different. This is my thunderstorm index. It's not radar, it's not rainfall, it's an index, a thunderstorm index. And when the values get up here above about 0.5 to 0.9, that's very high. Well, what do I see for the Carolinas is that as we get toward the weekend and your holiday weekend, I see still scattered showers and thunderstorms. That's very typical of July, but not showing up with very high values on our thunderstorm index, which is good. That means a lot of them will likely not be severe, at least as forecast at this point. Now, over the next 48 hours to 60 hours, can you see here moving through the day on Tuesday, widespread scattered showers and storms move across the state. Watch it again. So Monday morning showers, there it is in the afternoon and evening, then getting into Tuesday evening and then into Wednesday. So we're dealing with this widely scattered showers and storms to start the week off. But it's this boundary in through here that I'm going to watch most carefully, okay? So Monday, let's get it going here and see how things evolve. So starting off Monday afternoon and evening, then getting into Tuesday morning, afternoon, and evening, we can still see those scattered showers and storms on that boundary. See it there? But after we get past Wednesday, what you're going to notice is, here it is, Wednesday afternoon showers and storms. Remember the first 3 days of the week. But as we work our way toward the end of the week, high pressure tries to build in here. Now what that's going to attempt to do, it's going to attempt to push this boundary I kept telling you about, that front, farther south. So Thursday morning, afternoon, there it is, still stormy Thursday afternoon, but getting into the evening hours. And then, like I said, toward the end of the week, see Friday? This is Friday evening. This is that high pressure cell kind of calming things down. And as we work our way into the 4th of July Saturday, well, there it is. Maybe some scattered showers and storms, but we would expect that anyway, right? But overall, this is not a wet pattern as we move toward the end of this week. So storms early, backing off toward the end of the week. What is it every day? About a 30 to 50% chance until you get to the end of the week where the numbers fall off. Week 2, now this is very interesting. I have the European on the right and the GFS on the left. Now, both of them are calling for North Carolina to see possibly drier than average conditions into week 2. And that would make sense because the jet stream is going to build a bit of a ridge here over the Intermountain West. Both models have it. So it's going to do something a bit more like this, okay? And as that particular pattern sets up, it breaks down what was the big ridge over the Great Lakes and just moves it back in this direction. But as it does so, it just keeps a lot of good upper level flow away from North Carolina. So I'm just going to tell you, this is typical summer heat and pop-up thunderstorm activity. I expect that for the next 2 weeks for you, okay? I don't see anything in the tropics. I'll explain that more to you in just a few moments. But very typical summer type weather for us in North Carolina. Now, as we start talking about those temperatures, over the last month, we have been technically cooler than average. This is the temperature anomalies over the last month, and you can see where the heat was, and you can see where it was cooler here across the United States. Also cool in the Northwest as well. Well, that has set us back in terms of the accumulation of growing degree day units. And across the state of North Carolina, we're averaging between 80 and 180 GDUs, or growing degree day units, off of our normal pace. So if you feel like the crops are behind in accumulating this heat, they are, and we can see it here in this particular map. Now, we have had since May 1st anywhere between 4 and up to 10 days across North Carolina where we've had temperatures above 90 degrees, but certainly no extreme heat. All of the temperatures above 100 have been kept here in the South Central Plains or in the desert of the Southwest or in the Central Valley of California. So we've not seen any extreme heat across the state since May 1st. What are we going to be doing in terms of temperatures today? A lot of upper 80s into the low 90s. As we play this forward, let's pause it right there. On Tuesday, same story. As we work our way out to Wednesday, can you see how the temperatures are going back over toward normal, maybe even slightly cooler than normal, showing up in a few places? You know, normal would be low 90s, and now we're seeing these mid to upper 80s as we work our way into the 4th of July weekend. That's when the ridge built into the Great Lakes and that trough, remember me telling you about it, slides down here. Just increases cloud cover, brings in a wind that doesn't come from the south, instead maybe comes from a more northerly direction. And as a result, we've got, remember that big high pressure cell there? So if flow comes in like this, that's not a hot pattern. So we go over to what could be a beautiful 4th of July weekend for us here in terms of temperatures in North Carolina. Beyond that, what about the 6 to 10 day forecast? Well, remember, the 6 to 10 day, the jet stream was still doing this, but it did have that little feature coming down here. So that's why we see near average temperatures here, cooler in the Northwest and warm in between. And as we get out here to middle part of July, both models are actually picking up more on normal temperatures to above average temperatures during that time period. That would be the middle part of July getting up to after the 14th. Tropics. Now, the tropics have been very interesting. The Madden-Julian Oscillation. It broke out of phase 3, came racing through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and has been sitting here since the beginning of June. That's a standing wave over Africa. Now, how do you see that? Well, remember, the MJO is labeled. Region number 1 is here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And what we're looking at is these colors I'm encapsulating here mean where the air is rising, and these colors in here mean the air is sinking. All right, if the MJO is going to stay here for another 15 days, that standing wave over Africa is going to stay put. And that means we're going to have to watch off the coast of Africa for any developing tropical systems to move across the Atlantic. Remember, though, they're dealing with some pretty dry air. We do still have our very weak La Nina still going here. In fact, we would technically not call this La Nina. This is ENSO neutral because of what the winds are doing. But very warm in the North Pacific and very warm in the main development region. But interestingly enough, in this area, we're getting the effect of a La Nina. Now, what do I mean? Whenever we see La Ninas developing here, it often, in this area, gives us low wind shear values. And if this is the climatological value of wind shear, the blue line tells you we were high early in May, but we've dropped back down and seen a lot of below normal numbers. Below normal activity and wind shear would increase the chances of any would-be hurricane to become strong. Now, what's keeping them away right now is the dry, dusty air. But I want you to be watching right over here in the coming days for something to come off of Africa. Now, bigger news as we look out longer term in this forecast. Let's get to the middle of July, July 9th and 10th. I will be watching, and I want you to watch with me. I will be watching for any hint that higher atmospheric pressure will set up in this area. Because if it does so, we get ring of fire precipitation around it and extremely dry conditions over the Carolinas. The good news is right now, the high pressure cell is sitting down here, and it keeps moving back and forth between these two areas. And that's good. Keep it out there, because if that occurs, you can see that the Gulf of Mexico remains open for nearly everybody. And this would be a pattern that's going to keep a lot of heat here, but maybe keep us closer to normal in terms of temperatures and moisture across North Carolina as we move forward. I think it won't be till mid-month till we start to see more frequent above average temperatures, all right? To finish this all up, quick international perspective. Over here in Europe, around the Black Sea. So here's the Black Sea. So Ukraine, the Russian wheat belt showing up dry and warm over the next 10 days. And in China, we have a developing story as well. And that is flooding along the Mayu front over the last week. Well, it's going to continue in the next 10 days. Beijing is here, but the farming area that is around Beijing, which I kind of just put in there inside of that C shape, is actually looking pretty good in terms of moisture. All right, so we need to watch it carefully because where those desert locusts are going through right here, air is very, very dry. So we'll see if they continue to spread with time. Okay, wanted to give that all to you here. I look forward to giving you another update next week after the 4th of July weekend. Have a good one. We'll talk to you then. Thank you.